Okay, as a starter, I'd like you to open up the 916 assignment and complete the quick writes. When you open up the assignment, you'll see this PDF, and the first quick write says, "It is the pride of kings that throws mankind into confusion." To what extent do you agree with this assertion? You can fully agree, partially agree, or disagree. Explain your reasoning. The second says, "Never can true reconcilement grow where wounds of deadly hate have pierced so deep." To what extent do you agree with these words? Explain your reasoning and offer evidence to support your position. When you're done with that, the essential questions for the lesson are: how has Paine structured common sense, and how will you use a similar structure to write your own argument? The learning targets are to identify and evaluate the arguments and reasons in Paine's essay, and to support an argument with reasons and address and refute a counter-argument. So we're moving on. Our first unit was on Native American literature, and now we're going to be moving on to the Age of Enlightenment. And this took place from the early 1700s to the early 1800s. During this time, there was an emphasis in logic and reason. There was an interest in science, and people in literature tend to be focused on society as a whole rather than focused on the individual. So our first writer will be Thomas Paine, and he was born in England in 1737. He represented his fellow workers in a petition for a living wage in 1773, and the reason why I included that detail is because in the media today, you see people campaigning for $15 an hour to be the minimum wage, or in other words, a living wage. And it's just interesting how the same issues were present back then, and they still exist today. Like this idea of people making enough money in any job to be able to live on. Thomas Paine, so he went to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania from England in 1774. He wrote Common Sense in early 1776, and in it he argued for independence from British rule, which was a courageous act of high treason against England. He believed in the rights of the humblest person and wrote of equality for all. This is just a quote from his piece Common Sense, which you will read, which you'll see when we read it. "I offer nothing more than simple facts, plain arguments, and common sense." He returned to England and wrote Rights of Man in 1791 and 1792, which suggested the overthrow of the British monarchy, and for this he was indicted for high treason and forced to seek refuge in France. He returned to America in 1802, where he was no longer respected because of his atheist beliefs. 6 people went to his funeral in 1809, and then his remains were transported back to England in 1819 in a token of repentance for his earlier condemnation of his home country, and his final resting place is unknown. So the piece that we're going to be looking at first is Common Sense, and it's an essay, and in it, Paine argues that the colonies should not reconcile their differences with Great Britain. Instead, America should become independent. It's interesting on it that it says written by an Englishman. He kept his name anonymous, obviously for his own safety, but also just this idea that like he himself is an Englishman, and he doesn't think what they're doing is right. So when you have your document open, so right after your quick writes, you'll see Common Sense by Thomas Paine, and you'll notice some like ellipses, ... and that just means that I cut off a little bit just to shorten it up for you. So I want you to annotate in the margins how he structured his piece. So these first 4 paragraphs, these are his opening remarks. So in the left-hand margin, write opening remarks. It's kind of like an introduction, right? So he says, "Mankind being originally equal in the order of creation, the equality could only be destroyed by some subsequent circumstance. The distinctions of rich and poor may, in a great measure, be accounted for. But there is another and greater distinction for which no truly natural or religious reason can be assigned, and that is the distinction of men into kings and subjects. Male and female are the distinctions of nature, good and bad the distinctions of heaven, but how a race of men came into the world so exalted above the rest and distinguished like some new species is worth inquiring into, and whether they are the means of happiness or of misery to mankind. In the early ages of the world, according to the scripture chronology, there were no kings, the consequence of which was there were no wars. It is the pride of kings which throws mankind into confusion. In the following pages, I offer nothing more than simple facts, plain arguments, and common sense, and have no other preliminaries to settle with the reader than that he will divest himself of prejudice and prepossession and suffer his reason and his feelings to determine for themselves, that he will put on, or rather, that he will not put off, the true character of a man, and generously enlarge his views beyond the present day. So, from this, I hope that you can see what Paine's view of kings is. He doesn't believe that kings were appointed by God, okay? He doesn't believe that they are better than anybody else, and he believes that that society would be better without them. In the following pages, he says that he offers simple facts, plain arguments, and common sense. And what is he asking of readers? He's basically asking readers to just come into this with an open mind. Okay, whatever you thought before, I want you to come in and read what I have to say with an open mind. So, this is just to go back to the quick write that you did, and this idea that, do you agree with Paine that it is the pride of kings that throws mankind into confusion? And when we say kings today, I think we can expand that to presidents and prime ministers and people in power, dictators. Do we think it's because of them that throws like all of civilians into confusion? So if you haven't already done the quick write, please do so. Okay, then then what he goes into next. So this isn't like divided up in his essay, but we can see how he structured it. So first he has his opening remarks, like an introduction, and then he goes into his argument that he doesn't think we should reconcile with Great Britain. He thinks that America should become independent. And then he gives reasons for why he thinks this. So what I want you to do is I want you to identify his reasons why we should be independent and number them, okay? So I challenge the warmest advocate for reconciliation to show a single advantage that this continent can reap by being connected with Great Britain. I repeat the challenge. Not a single advantage is derived. Our corn will fetch its price in any market in Europe, and our imported goods must be paid for. Buy them where we will. So that's going to be your first one, okay? And it's about trade, okay? Our trade, isn't going to be affected, right? We're going to have to, whatever we sell, it's going to be the same. Like, we're going to get the same amount of money, and whatever we import from other countries, we're gonna have to pay the same price, right? So that's your first reason, is that trade won't be affected. But the injuries and disadvantages which we sustain by that connection are without number, and our duty to mankind at large, as well as to ourselves, instruct us to renounce the alliance, because any submission to or dependence on Great Britain tends directly to involve this continent in European wars and quarrels, and set us at variance with nations who would otherwise seek our friendship, and against whom we have neither anger nor complaint. Okay, so that's the second reason, okay, that being aligned with Great Britain involves us in wars and quarrels, and if we weren't aligned with them, then we would still have friendly relations with these countries. So that's the last one that I'm going to do with you. So those are two of the reasons that he has for why we should be independent from Great Britain. And then I want you to find the other four, but I will continue to read it to you. As Europe is our market for trade, we ought to form no partial connection with any part of it. It is the true interest of America to steer clear of European contentions, which she could never do. Well, by her dependence on Britain, she has made the make-weight in the scale of British politics. Europe is too thickly planted with kingdoms to be long at peace, and whenever a war breaks out between England and any foreign power, the trade of America goes to ruin because of her connection with Britain. The next war may not turn out like the last, and should it not, the advocates for reconciliation now will be wishing for separation then, because neutrality in that case would be a safer. Sorry, I forgot that I said the definition of reconcile is to restore friendly relations. So he doesn't believe that we should restore friendly relations with Great Britain. So, because neutrality in that case would be a safer convoy than a man of war, everything that is right or reasonable pleads for separation. The blood of the slain, the weeping voice of nature cries, 'tis time to part. Even the distance at which the Almighty hath placed England and America is a strong and natural proof that the authority of one over the other was never the design of heaven. The time likewise at which the continent was discovered adds weight to the argument, and the manner in which it was peopled increases the force of it. The Reformation was preceded by the discovery of America, as if the Almighty graciously meant to open a sanctuary to the persecuted in future years, when home should afford neither friendship nor safety. 'Tis repugnant to reason, to the universal order of things, to all examples from former ages, to suppose that this continent can long remain subject to any external power. The most sanguine in Britain doth not think so. The utmost stretch of human wisdom cannot, at this time, compass a plan, short of separation, which can promise the continent even a year's security. Reconciliation is now a fallacious dream. Nature has deserted the connection, and art cannot supply her place. For as Milton wisely expresses, never can true reconcilement grow where wounds of deadly hate have pierced so deep. Small islands not capable of protecting themselves are the proper objects for government to take under their care, but there is something absurd in supposing a continent to be perpetually governed by an island. In no instance hath nature made the satellite larger than its primary planet, and as England and America, with respect to each other, reverse the common order of nature, it is evidence that they belong to different systems, England to Europe, America to itself. I am not induced by motives of pride, party, or resentment to espouse the doctrine of separation and independence. I am clearly, positively, and conscientiously persuaded that it is the true interest of this continent to be so, that everything short of that is mere patchwork, that it can afford no lasting felicity, that it is leaving the sword to our children and shrinking back at a time when a little more, a little further, would have rendered this continent the glory of the earth. As Britain hath not manifested the least inclination towards a compromise, we may be assured that no terms can be obtained worthy the acceptance of the continent, or anyways equal to the expense of blood and treasure we have been already put to. Okay, so if you haven't already done so, please skim through again, read through it again, and make sure that you have his six reasons labeled and numbered for why he believes America should be independent from Great Britain. And in that piece, in that section, you'll have seen the second quick write, which is about if you agree with Milton and Paine that true reconcilement can never grow where wounds of deadly hate have pierced so deep. So if you haven't already done so, please complete that quick write as well, and also offer evidence or an example to support your position. Okay. The next section, so hopefully you're labeling these sections in the margins, left-hand margin, and you're drawing lines after each one so you can kind of see how Paine has organized it. So in this section, Paine addresses and refutes the counter-argument's reasons. Okay, and so the counter-argument is that would be the opposite argument to his. Okay, so his is we need to be independent. The counter-argument would be no, we need to reconcile with Great Britain. We need to stay with Great Britain. And so what he's going to do is he's going to say, okay, I understand why people would think that we should stay with Great Britain. And he's going to say their reasons for why he thinks that. But then he's going to refute them. Okay, he's going to prove why they're wrong. So as I'm reading, I want you to go through and I want you to number the reasons. So put reason 1 and then where he refutes it. And I'll help you with the first one. And then he does this 3 times. Okay? It says, I've heard it asserted by some that as America has flourished under her former connection with Great Britain, the same connection is necessary towards our future happiness and will always have the same effect. Nothing can be more fallacious than this kind of argument. We may as well assert that because a child has thrived upon milk, that it is never to have meat, or that the first 20 years of our lives is to become a precedent for the next 20. But even this is admitting more than is true, for I answer roundly that America would have flourished as much, and probably much more, had no European power taken any notice of her. The commerce by which she hath enriched herself are the necessaries of life, and will always have a market, while eating is the custom of Europe. So the first reason why some might say that we should stay with Great Britain is because we have flourished with her, under her. We have done well. And so you would put like reason one up here, and then where he starts, nothing can be more here, all the way to the end, that's refute one. So he addresses a reason that people might say for why we should stay connected to Great Britain, and then he refutes it. Okay, so reason one, refute one. Now I want you to do the next two by yourself. So you'll write reason two, and then like refute two, how he proves that reason wrong, and then you'll do it again a third time. But she protected us, say some. That she hath engrossed us is true, and defended the continent at our expense as well as her own is admitted, and she would have defended Turkey from the same motive, for the sake of trade and dominion. Alas, we have been long led away by ancient prejudices, and made large sacrifices to superstition. We have boasted the protection of Great Britain without considering that her motive was interest, not attachment, and that she did not protect us from our enemies on our account, but from her enemies on her own account, from those who had no quarrel with us on any other account, and who will always be our enemies on the same account. But Britain is the parent country, say some. Then the more shame upon our conduct. Even brutes do not devour their young, nor savages make war upon their families. Wherefore the assertion if true turns to her reproach, but it happens not to be true, or only partly so, and the phrase parent or mother country hath been I'm not good at saying that word, Jesuitically adopted by the king and his parasites, with a low papistical design of gaining an unfair bias on the credulous weakness of our minds. Europe, and not England, is the parent country of America. This new world hath been the asylum for the persecuted lovers of civil and religious liberty from every part of Europe. Hither have they fled, not from the tender embraces of the mother, but from the cruelty of the monster. And it is so far true of England that the same tyranny which drove the first emigrants from home pursues their descendants still. So, same thing. Say reason two, label where you see the second reason why some might think that we should stay with Great Britain, and then refute two. So where he refutes that reason and proves them wrong. And then reason three, why people might think that we should stay with Britain, and then refute three, where he proves that reason wrong. All right. Then finally, I want you to label, so draw a line over it, and then label in the left-hand margin closing remarks. So you can see that he brings it to a close. It's like a conclusion. But where, say some, is the King of America? I'll tell you, friend, he reigns above, and doth not make havoc of mankind like the royal brute of Great Britain. In America, the law is king, for as in absolute governments the king is law, so in free countries the law ought to be king, and there ought to be no other. But lest any ill use should afterwards arise, let the crown at the conclusion of the ceremony be demolished and scattered among the people whose right it is. Ye that oppose independence now, ye know not what ye do. Ye are opening a door to eternal tyranny by keeping vacant the seat of government. Ye that tell us of harmony and reconciliation, can ye restore to us a time that is past? Can ye give to prostitution its former innocence? Neither can ye reconcile Britain and America. As well can the lover forgive the ravisher of his mistress, as the continent forgive the murderers of Britain. The Almighty hath implanted in us these unextinguishable feelings for good and wise purposes. They are the guardians of his image in our hearts. O ye that love mankind, ye that dare oppose not only the tyranny but the tyrant, stand forth. Every spot of the old world is overrun with oppression. Freedom hath been hunted around the globe. Asia and Africa have long expelled her. Europe regards her like a stranger, and England hath given her warning to depart. O receive the fugitive, and prepare in time an asylum for mankind. Okay, so just as a reflection, I want you to think about to what extent are the points Paine makes valid? And valid means they have a sound basis in logic or fact. They're reasonable. Okay, and I just want you to think about it. Do you think that the points that Paine makes are valid? Okay, his reasons. How appropriate is the title Common Sense for the piece? Do you think what he says is common sense or not? And finally, in what ways is this a good example of Enlightenment literature? Okay, does it emphasize logic and reason? Does it focus on society as a whole? Okay, now it's your turn. You're going to write like Paine, okay? So you're going to support an argument with reasons, just like this, okay? You have an argument, and then you give me 3 reasons for it, and then you're going to show me that you understand and can refute a counter-argument's reasoning. So think about what we could do to either make Spring Lake Park High School better or how to make America better, like American society better, okay? And I want you to write down an argument. So, like, if you're doing Spring Lake Park High School, how can we make Spring Lake Park High School better? And you wanted to say, like, a later school start time, or you wanted to say a longer lunch, or something like that. Then you would write the argument here. If you're doing how you want to make America better, American society better, you might think, I mean, the first things that come to my mind are big political issues. You might want to think of something kind of along the lines of politics that might help for one way that we could make America better. And then 3 reasons why. Okay. So if you want to say, I don't know, a big one right now is like gun control, right? And then 3 reasons why or something. All right, then you are going to do the counter argument. So basically you want to show that you can understand both sides, right? Like Paine, he can understand the opposing argument, why they think what they think, but he's also capable of proving them wrong, right? And so this is a really good persuasive strategy because if you present your argument with your reasons and then you destroy basically the other argument by refuting, like proving why their reasons aren't valid, and then the opposing side is then only left with yours, right? They're only left with your argument because theirs has been like disproven basically. So in this case, you're going to write down the opposing argument here. So this would be like, no, we need the same school start time that we already have. Or no, we need the same amount of lunchtime we already have. Or no, we shouldn't. If you're doing the gun laws, then no, we shouldn't put in place any more gun control, right? And then what you're going to want to do is give 2 reasons why the opposing side might think what they think. And then here, the refutes, you're going to want to explain why they're wrong. Okay? And so we don't want to, like, Paine doesn't have a balanced essay, right? He doesn't say, like, I think this, other people think that. He's really trying to persuade people. It's a persuasive text to get more people who are empathetic towards Great Britain to say, no, we need to be independent from them, right? Kind of like not necessarily a call to fight, but it sort of is, right? Like, he's saying, we need to make this happen, right? We need to become independent from Great Britain now and not leave it for later. And so, hopefully, that makes sense. You just want to show that you can do what Paine can do, right? That you can present an argument, back it up with reasons, see the opposing argument and why they think what they do, but prove them wrong, okay? So that we're only left with your argument at the end, essentially. All right, if you have any questions, please let me know.